Hi, everybody, and welcome. I am one of the founders of Divorcify, and today I am thrilled to bring on not only one of the best CDFA and coaches in the game, but also a dear friend of mine who's going to talk to us about a very important topic: financial abuse. Unlike emotional abuse and physical abuse as professionals, that may be at times a bit easier for us to recognize. However, financial abuse, maybe not so much. So she's really going to talk to us about how we can step up as professionals and recognize different signs of financial abuse in the divorce process. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much, Sonia, and thank you everyone for being here and the people listening to the recording later on. I'm so glad that Divorcify is highlighting this as a topic. I know there's need for information, and so I'm looking at this for information for the professionals. So it's really a primer on economic abuse for all the divorce professionals: lawyers, finance people, mental health professionals, and coaches. I'm going to send out these slides afterwards, so you don't need to take notes, but I'm a CDC certified divorce coach, certified divorce specialist, and I am a CDFA as well. And my practice really focuses on high net worth women leaving coercive marriages. So I see a lot of financial abuse, which is the reason I wanted to talk about this. The agenda will be: what is financial and economic abuse, the distinctions between the two, how common the issue is, what are some signs of financial abuse? So what are some questions you can ask to see if this might be happening to your clients? And then as divorce professionals, how can we help? And I'll break that down by the specific professional categories so that you'll know how you can potentially help your clients with this. And then what are some resources that I can share? So I will hold questions at the end, but I'm happy to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation. So just a quote to sort of set the stage. In a work relationship where one doesn't act in good faith, you call that embezzlement. When it happens in a marriage, if one steals the life savings of the other, you call that what? A bad marriage. That comes from Sagess's Women of Affluence final report. And I think that really, when financial abuse happens in the context of a marriage, we don't always recognize it or see it as something that is as abusive as, a physical violence or emotional abuse. But it is a factor that leaves people really trapped. The definition of financial abuse is it's a common tactic used by abusers to gain power and control in a relationship. They can be subtle or overt, and they include tactics to conceal information, limit the victim's access to assets, or reduce accessibility to family finances. It really is to entrap a person in a relationship. Sometimes it's throughout the relationship, and sometimes it happens when someone is trying to leave the relationship. That's when money tends to disappear. And that's from the National Network to End Domestic Violence, which is an American organization which has some terrific information. A wider definition, which is starting to come into law, is economic abuse. So that's not only limiting access to bank accounts, but is limiting your ability to work. We're finding over COVID that abusers are actually hiding their partners' laptops, for example, so that they can't work. It's, calling someone or texting someone dozens of times at work. So it's anything that really gets in the way of somebody's financial independence. And that is coming from Dr. Nicola Sharp from Surviving Economic Abuse, which is a UK organization. And I have links to all of these at the end and on the slides, which you will receive. So some statistics. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience domestic or intimate partner violence in the US. And these are pretty similar numbers globally. 95% of all intimate partner abuse cases include financial abuse. It's just such a very easy method people have of controlling one another using money that we tend to see it in a lot of cases. And it is often cited as the #1 reason why people do not leave a physically abusive relationship, because they simply cannot get the access to go. They can't rent an apartment. They, don't want to be leaving children or pets or, and it's really access to funds. They can't even hire a lawyer in a lot of cases. 60% of women in intimate partner relationships generally report that their partner made them take out a loan when they didn't want to, built up debt in their name, or used their credit without permission. So, because a lot of assets are shared in a marriage, even in non-abusive, and I'm sort of using that term loosely because there is abuse, clearly, relationships, there are often power imbalances when it comes to money. And then when you try to leave those relationships, that's when it becomes very, very clear that there is a problem. Some of you may have seen this in terms of physical violence or other types of abuse. The UK organization Surviving Economic Abuse has applied it to financial abuse. So we look at, coercion, and they use her. I'll apologize for the exclusive pronoun, but it, just statistically does happen more to women who are surviving this. But, they'll deny access to the car. They will refuse to pay child support. So this can extend into post-separation abuse as well. We do see that a lot. It can be making people feel worthless. It can be, forcing a partner to account for every penny when that's not something that's been decided as a budgeting exercise that both people agree to. I mean, some people like to have a very detailed accounting of their finances for both parties. And that's acceptable if both people sign up for it. But this idea that it's like his money, or in the case of a primary breadwinner who's female, her money, and then, the other partner has to kind of get an allowance and account for every dollar spent, that can be very abusive because it erodes one's really spirit and sense of self over time. So, and again, you'll be getting copies of all of this. These are some really important questions because when asked are you abused, most people say no, even in the case of physical abuse. So, professionals do come up with screening tools to find out, is there abuse there? Because abuse, people think it maybe looks like something that it's not. And so specific questions can be really helpful. So, like, does your partner steal money from you or your family? Do you have to give access to your bank accounts if you don't want to? Do you not know about money or household resources? Some people don't know what their spouses make, and some people are told it's none of their business. And again, if you're in a marriage partnership, that's something that you should know if you want to. Are you put on an allowance? I see this a lot. I deal with affluent women, many of whom are stay at home and their husbands have quite powerful jobs and they have an allowance. And again, it's not the couple sitting down, looking at their overall income, looking at their financial goals and deciding like, here's the amount of discretionary spending we're each going to have. This is my money. And if you're good, I will give you this amount of money to spend. So it's a sort of a policing. And again, this is all about control. Are you asked for receipts? Like, this isn't your employer, this is your spouse. Overusing credit cards. One of the biggest things that we tend to see is running up debt in the other party's name, or not allowing the other person to build a credit history, like only using supplementary credit cards. And the party doesn't even necessarily realize that they're not building up their own credit rating by virtue of just having an extended card. And then when they go to divorce, they find out, it's hard to get an apartment if you don't have a credit rating. It's hard to get a loan. It's hard to get litigation financing if you need it. So again, I won't go through all of the questions here, but family businesses are a place where we see a lot of financial abuse, where a partner is required to work in that business, but doesn't see any of the money. They may be paid for tax reasons, but they don't tend to have financial independence. Another thing we see is that, if it is a business and the business is not paying taxes, that tax dodge will extend to you as the partner. So it's like your spouse is committing, whether it's tax fraud or just not paying their taxes. That is worn by you if you're partners in that business. So, that's a form of financial abuse as well. And that's why, you know, my clients all work with attorneys, and having that financial disclosure is so key, because you really want to understand exactly what's going on with the finances. You know, make sure taxes have been paid, getting business valuators involved, just to make sure that you actually know what's really happening. A subspecialty, which is my subspecialty, is affluent abuse. And I only mention it because often people think, well, how can you be financially abused if you're wealthy? You know, it seems like these are contradictions in terms. But in fact, we see financial abuse a lot in controlling high net worth marriages, because money can be weaponized when you have a lot of it. And money is often used as a method of control and power in business, and that tends to extend to the family. So, we will find cases of people like sleeping in their Range Rovers because their supplementary card has been cut off. They cannot go to a hotel. Sometimes they feel like they can't access shelters or shouldn't access shelters because they do have assets. Now, most shelter workers are very educated about this, and certainly, where there are economic thresholds, if that capital is not accessible to you, those limits will be dropped. But again, it's an education process if you're working with clients who are facing that. Legal abuse is a form of financial abuse when they drain your resources through lawsuits. So, as family lawyers, you can see really, really drawn out cases and lots of like little frivolous add-ons to try to drain the person's resources. There's also technological abuse, such as, cyber stalking, but also blocking access to the internet if somebody needs to work. Again, at higher levels, there's a lot of hiding of money. So there's hidden accounts, there's offshore accounts, there's asset trusts, there's cryptocurrency. That's becoming a big thing, hiding it in NFTs and cryptocurrency. And I mean, just as a little experiment, I, tried to buy some NFT art, and you have to go through like 8 different steps where you're just simply a number. So it's a pretty easy way to make money disappear. So again, in financial disclosure, if you're a financial professional or a lawyer, ask cryptocurrency, asset trusts, try to get it on there. So at least if they're not disclosing it, then there's an issue of non-disclosure. It's not that it hasn't been asked. Hiding money in privately held companies, again, so the importance of business valuators. And we see a lot that the wealthier partner uses their financial resources to try to coerce children to side with the abuser. Like they might say, if you want to live with mom, I'm not paying your university education. And so we do see children often brought into financial abuse when people are threatening to cut off the kids if they, sort of side with a parent. So I mentioned it's not just during the marriage. I mean, financial abuse is very easy to carry on post-separation. So whereas many forms of abuse, physical abuse, it more tends to end when you're in a different place. Emotional abuse, you can, sometimes manage using third-party software like our Family Wizard, where there's tracking. But we do see a lot of financial abuse. It's, not paying child or spousal support obligations on time and forcing the person to go to their attorney to get that dealt with, which again, it's running up costs, it's taking time. And I mentioned this later with financial professionals, but just because the divorce agreement says that debts have been separated or debts must be paid, doesn't mean those debts have been paid. And creditor law is different than family law. And so even though you may not be on the hook for debts in terms of your divorce settlement, you may still be on the hook for those debts when it comes to, you being a debtor. So it's just making sure that clients are given those post-separation to-do lists, that they understand the importance of actually, closing accounts and getting any joint debts paid off and canceled and then refinanced in your own name. Unfortunately, we see children's education funds and bank accounts also being drained by financially abusive partners. So, again, it's just things to watch out for with your clients. So, in terms of what can be done For financial professionals, really I would say the big takeaway is to help your clients rebuild. So if they're in the middle of the divorce process, it can be extremely disheartening to realize you've had debts run up in your name, you've had your accounts emptied, and it can be a very hopeless situation. So it really is starting with, helping clients get like a small credit card and, making some charges on it and paying it off every month to start to build a credit rating, helping restore a credit rating in some cases, getting them in touch with debt consolidation services so that they can start to rebuild. Helping clients with financial literacy. I'm actually doing a trauma of money course right now, and so much of financial literacy is shame-based. And for people who have survived financial abuse, the kind of lecturing tone of a lot of the really popular personal wealth gurus, like, put your money in an envelope, and they make you feel like you're really stupid if somehow you've ended up in debt. And for survivors, it's a double whammy because money has been weaponized against them. And then you don't want there to be like a shame-based approach to getting out of their situation. So, lots of empathy and compassion. There are some great financial literacy sites out there. I personally like Elvest. It has more of a woman focus, but I just find it's very empathy focused and it feels fairly trauma informed. So helping them with financial literacy in an empathetic way. And then, again, making sure that client assets and debts are in their own name. So changing beneficiaries. That's not necessarily part of divorce. It's not like a will. You often have to actually change the beneficiaries. So making sure that all of those forms have been signed, and that all debts have been, as I mentioned before, paid off and are in that person's own name. Legal professionals. So, again, the major takeaway is letting clients know their rights under the law. So it is insisting on full financial disclosure. The date of separation can be really key, particularly in more high net worth cases, because if someone has gone and, incurred a bunch of debts that the other party didn't know about, if a case can be made that that party had exited the marriage, before that happened, say they were funding a second family, or, sometimes by strategically looking at that date of separation, it can help your client not have some of those debts. Again, it has to be made sure that they're paid off, because if they are named as a debtor, again, family law won't really protect them, but at least from a family law perspective, and if there's a home or something, they can get a disproportionate amount of the sale, perhaps, that can help them out of this situation. For lawyers to, just think about how your fees are structured now. Where I am in just outside Toronto, family lawyers are not permitted to do contingency-based work. I know lots of attorneys do that work in Canada and the US and across the globe. And if you're not doing contingency work, can there be more back-end fees? Are there litigation financing people someone can work with, just so that they don't see not having cash immediately as precluding them from working with an attorney? Because I find, some preliminary calls that I get, it's people saying, I can't afford a lawyer to free up the money. And so helping them get, temporary exclusive possession of the matrimonial home, or temporarily freeing up some of the assets so that they can pay for a lawyer, that can be really, really helpful. So, helping them maybe do that to be paid later, and then the money is there, it's just not there right away. And then there is an abuse screening tool. So this is more for mediation, but Suggest, which is an organization in Calgary, it's a globally available tool. They actually have an abuse screening tool that is very detailed, not just for financial abuse, to see if mediation is actually going to work. Because as I think most of you know, where there's a power imbalance, mediation can be really tricky. And so this is a screening tool that both parties They do the tool, and if it seems like there might be some abuse at play, mediators can at that point make a decision as to whether the mediation process will work or not. In most cases, the abusive party doesn't even want to complete the screening tool, which can be a big indication mediation might not be the best approach. So mental health professionals, again, validating that abuse does not have to be physical to be real. I find that so many clients who've been through coercive control and financial abuse is part of that, like they feel like it's not valid for them to have the feelings they have because the abuse hasn't necessarily been physical. So, helping to validate their experience could be a really huge benefit. And others, don't make an assumption that because they can pay for your services that they have access to money. Because the reality is a lot of people who have trapped capital do have access to good benefits through their spouse's employment plan, for example. But just because they're able to pay, a good fee per hour doesn't mean financial abuse might not be an issue. Money trauma is something that is real and needs to be healed if money was weaponized. And then, just learning what social services agencies are out there to help connect clients to, because this is a fairly new form of abuse, not in terms of it existing, but in terms of there being agencies that can help. For coaches, which is what I mostly do, it's really showing clients their options. So helping them work on a safe exit plan. So just like clients experiencing physical abuse, there needs to be an exit plan. And part of that plan involves, how are you going to gain some access to capital? Helping clients log abuse. So it's, if you go to the ATM and there's no money in there and there's a receipt, you keep it, or you take a diary of the fact that there was no money. Explaining the legal paths, is mediation going to work for you? Is arbitration going to work for you? Is litigation a better path? And again, that'll really depend on the individual and their family and their resources, but just helping them walk that path, helping them source a good divorce team, people that really understand financial abuse as an issue. And then really brainstorming some ways to raise money for a lawyer. So it can be, selling things. It can be asking friends. It could be how to talk to a lawyer about, do they have payment plans? Do they work on contingency? What does that look like? Can you do a quiet side hustle? Skimming money from the allowance. So most family lawyers have told me that obviously, like, instructing clients to hide money is never a good idea. But if clients need to gain access to finances so that they can go through the divorce process, that is absolutely contemplated under family law. So as long as it is logged and tracked, I'm going to take money from this account, and, as long as you're tracking it, you're not hiding it, it's fine, because in family law, it all comes out in the wash through disclosure. And counseling them too through meeting with bankers. There are more and more within the banks, as more and more bankers are being educated on this matter. If your name is on a joint account, even if you don't have PIN numbers and all the rest of it, you can often work with them to help you access them. So again, that's something that a coach can really help clients with. So some resources. Under legal aid typically has a threshold, and it's sometimes an income threshold, a family income threshold, or asset threshold. And so in the past, wealthier clients have not been able to access legal aid. Now, under COVID, a lot of legal aid services have actually dropped thresholds, particularly in the cases of intimate partner violence. So it's a question to ask, because again, legal aid could be used for some temporary orders to be put into place to free up capital to then hire the lawyer of your choice. So it is a way to access, to get access to your money. There is litigation financing and contingency fees. It's not cheap. You can range from paying 7% to up to 45% of your settlement amount, which is no small thing, and it's money that's coming from the family. But if you can't gain access to capital in any other way, it is an option. Women's shelters often have access to small amounts of capital. So that's, like if you need a safe place for the evening, if there's other types of violence involved, they can be really helpful. And domesticshelters.org is a great hub. Allstate Foundation has a domestic violence program that focuses on financial abuse. And so there's lots of great information on their website. nnedv.org, which I mentioned at the beginning, great resources, the hotline, which I'm sure most of you know about. And then there is an economic abuse screening tool that's offered through the UK organization SEA. So, that's a great one to use as well. And then I've just put down a couple of the other services. And then I've just started Lunch at the Club. It's a free online information portal for women leaving economically abusive situations. So, that's something that's free. Laws need to change. The US, it tends to be through the Violence Against Women Act. Department of Justice right now for financial exploitation deals with the elderly and adults with disabilities, but it does not specifically contemplate intimate partners. So that is something that organizations are working on. The UK just passed their domestic violence bill. I think it was actually just ratified today. And in Canada, it's actually included in our new Federal Divorce Act. Parenting time is impacted by any act of domestic violence, including financial abuse. So and we're looking at further criminalizing economic abuse as well. So a lot of people are working on this. It is recognized it is a real issue, but there is still work to be done.